Oh, I'm burning right now. It's really hot today in Canada. And you might be thinking, well, isn't Canada like a cold country? And it is in the winter, but in the summer, sometimes it gets blazing hot. And I can't even turn on the AC because I'm filming this video. And so what a great day to be reviewing a hot tube integrated amplifier and burning in my own home. Perfect. So this is the Fluxion Audio K4 budget integrated amplifier. And by budget, I mean it's about 1,300 Canadian dollars for what you see here without the tubes. So the tubes, you can actually get it from Fluxion Audio or you can supply it from somewhere else. So pretty affordable, pretty darn good for what you get in this box. Now, we'll talk about the value and the design philosophy and all that in this in a bit. But I want to talk about the Fluxion Audio as a company first. Now, Fluxion Audio, you probably scratching your head going, what is Fluxion? Who is Fluxion Audio? And I've had that same question before. It seems like they don't have a website, and I usually don't cover products that don't have a website. But the reason I decided to cover this is because I found the company quite interesting. Despite the fact they don't have a website, they mostly sell through Canuck Audio and emails from my understanding, which I'll link in the description below. And also from my understanding, the money is going straight to the engineer that built these tube amplifiers. So the engineer's name is Mr. Young, and he is a Korean Canadian just like me, and he builds these in Canada. So it's handmade in Canada from my understanding, again. And so, 1,300 Canadian dollars, translate that to US or euros or whatever your country's currency is, and that is the price of it, obviously plus shipping. The valves, you have to supply it yourself as well. But the valves I have here is the KT88. Now these do accept KT120s as well from my understanding, but I have not tried KT120s in here just yet. If I do in the future, I will update you guys on how that sounds. But so far I have been quite liking with whatever I have here that came with the unit when I purchased it. And the tubes are the KT88 Tungsel and the 6SN7 Tungsel as well, both reproductions from Russia, and the Sylvania 5A-R4 tubes. So very common tubes that you see in tube world very often. So you can tube roll, you can have some fun with this unit, and they respond pretty darn well. I did change out the KT88 to other KT88 tubes that I had momentarily. Some legendary ones, new old stock that I had, and wow, it was really beautiful. So we'll talk about that briefly, but for the most part, I think for most people out there, the reproduction ones or really any KT88 that you choose, you will be pretty satisfied with the sound quality that comes out of this unit. So you can go as budget on the tubes as you want or go as high as you want. And my advice is to reach out to Mr. Young, the creator of this integrated amplifier, for tube recommendations. He knows best what he created. And the reason I say that is because most tube, engineers or most tube devices that's made is really made with existing transformers. But he actually, from my understanding, winds his own transformers that you see here, which is rare. That gives him a lot of flexibility in the engineering process from my understanding, as well as just the overall integration with whatever he's building here. So this is actually a pretty good bang for the buck in my opinion. It has triode and ultra linear mode, as you can see here. Now the triode and ultra linear mode do come with different sound aspects that I'll explain later in the sound portion of this video, but for power rating, the ultra-linear mode outputs 12 watts per channel, while the triode mode outputs 6 watts per channel. And considering tube amplifiers, it's not a very heavy unit. It's about 10 kilograms, and it's actually pretty light. It's one of the lightest tube amplifiers that I have been able to, hold without crying. So that's nice, that's pretty nice. So the power amplifier turns on with a power switch, nice big power switch that's red, nicely labeled. Nice fonts as well for you to turn on and turn off the unit. You can also put it on standby if you want to warm up the unit or come back later. And this side, again, it has the triode or ultra linear mode that you can switch. It's labeled TRI for triode, I'm assuming, but I'm pretty sure. And the bottom, if you put it down, that's ultra linear mode. So quite nice. This does feel a little bit clunky at times, but for the most part, it works. And it has never failed, and I've done that many times. It also has a headphone amplifier that you can switch to the headphone section. So if you put the switch up, then you get the headphone section, and now it's a headphone amplifier. And then you put it down, and now it's a speaker amplifier. So quite versatile. You get a lot of value there. It's also a nice headphone amplifier. It does have a 3.5 millimeter, and that's all you get with the headphone plug option. But I've tried various different headphones on this unit, including my Headphone closed back headphones, as well as my Sennheiser HD600 that I know very, very well, since I use it almost on a daily basis to edit these videos, listen to music, and test equipment. And I have to say, this is a quite nice tube sounding amplifier for headphone users as well, and we'll talk about the sound signatures. But I feel like the speaker section relates a lot to the headphone section as well in terms of the sound quality that you get. So whatever I say about the speaker section, minus the soundstage and the imaging, because that's quite limited in terms of headphones, and it really depends if you're wearing open back or closed back headphones. Usually you get a larger soundstage with tube devices, and that's true for headphone sections as well. But all in all, the sound signature is pretty darn similar with the speaker section and the headphone section on this one, which is nice to see since it varies quite a bit with tube amplifiers I've seen in the past in terms of the overall sound signature and the quality you get. Here, it seems like everything is in balance with the quality you get both for the headphone section as well as the speaker section. Now, in terms of the build is pretty minimalistic. I do like the black look. It's a matte black finish, and for this price range, I think this is an excellent build. No, it's not some glossy, really nice finish, but for the most part, for the money you pay, I think everything is built very well, metal, and it's pretty substantial in what you get. When you touch the unit, when you feel the unit, it feels premium for the price you paid. As a buyer, I'm pretty satisfied. Now, in terms of the volume knob, it is very nice and smooth. I wish there was a little bit more resistance to it, but overall, it's a plastic remote with a metal thing in the middle. And it has a really nice label that you can see here, so you know exactly how much you're turning. Now, it doesn't have a remote, and that is a big downside for me for an integrated unit or any preamplifier. But you know what? For $1,300, and if you plan to use it on the rack like I do, and it doesn't take much to turn the volume on, for the money, I think it's acceptable. But that's up to you. Some people really need remotes. Now, at least this is not a $19,000 unit like the Audio Note that I reviewed that doesn't have a remote. So I'll give it a little break at this price range. Now let's take a look at the back. Now for me, I don't know about you, but the back looks really sexy, probably because of all these transformers. And really the transformer is the highlight of this show right here, because it's a tube integrated amplifier that is rather affordable, that has custom hand-woven or at least made in-house transformers, which I really like. Anyways, let's look at the back and the input options. And as for the money you pay, you do only get one input. I wish that you had a little bit more flexibility there, but unfortunately you do get only one pair of RCA inputs, which shouldn't be a problem if you plan to use this just for a single system or a single source, I should say, like a CD player, or you just stream or turntable, what have you. The inconvenience is that you would have to switch it back and forth every time you switch sources if you have multiple, but honestly, not that bad for the price you pay, in my opinion. At the end of the day, it is a budget integrated amplifier that you pay a lot less for the performance you're getting, in my opinion, which we'll get to in a minute. In the back, you do have the right and left very clearly labeled output for the speaker binding post. Now the speaker binding post is a little bit, well, that's another, it's plasticky. It's kind of weird that the black one, the negative, is gold plated while the red one is not gold plated. But you know what? It works. It takes both banana and spades and bare wire, what have you. And it's not the worst thing in the world. And of course, that's in reference with the price as well. Of course, if I saw this on a much more expensive unit, then I would be pretty disappointed. But for the price you pay, I think it's pretty acceptable. And at the same time, I do like the fact that it's not a totally round or really shitty ones, because you do have this handle here, basically, because it's shaped like this, you can grab it more easily. If you're using spades and what have you, you're able to tighten it down really tightly and also loosen it pretty easily without much effort or secondary tools, which I like. So that's pretty much it from the back. Let's talk about the sound now. So I quite like the sound of this thing. It's quite nice, but we'll talk about the sound in a minute. Quickly, I just want to draw your attention to the internals of this thing. And you can see that, it's nice. It's all point-to-point wiring. And the only thing that I would say is that I wish it was a little bit more tidy, but, that's just an opinion and something that I would like to see, just a little bit more tidiness with the wiring and all that stuff. But other than that, it's quite nice, and you can see that it doesn't really have exotic audiophile components in there, and that's because from my understanding, again, Mr. Young is against the idea of capacitors making a difference. He believes in measuring his components and making sure they're good quality before he puts it into his amplifiers, but he doesn't believe in the capacitor nonsense like I do. So agree to disagree, we can move on from there. But what I can agree is that his amplifiers sound awesome. Now, his tube amplifiers, honestly, I was so close. And I still might, and I know Mr. Young might perhaps get upset, who knows. I haven't really talked to the guy much in years, but I might change the components in there to something else to see what that does. And maybe I'll surprise him. Maybe I'll challenge him. I don't know. It's just a fun idea. But point aside, the amplifier, despite the fact that it doesn't have exotic components that you may want, there's no denying the fact that this thing sounds awesome. Now, is the ultra linear better or triode better? Well, there's clear differences, but at the same time, they're both great in their own ways. For example, the triode mode, while it doesn't have the really fast, punchy bass like the ultra linear does, but it has nuances. It has more, I don't know, it's more silky, detailed. But the thing is that this is not a really silky, smooth kind of amplifier. While it's smooth, it retains all the information, the details, and you can hear all those things. It's a pretty neutral sounding amplifier as well. And for a tube amplifier to be this neutral, that's pretty impressive. It's a very neutral sounding amplifier while it sounds still tubey. So it still has that mid-range characteristic that you would expect from a tube amplifier. The high frequency sweetness, it's all there. It's done really, really well. It sounds really, really good and really, really great, but it's pretty linear in the fashion where you don't seem to have a lot of coloration like some tube amplifiers do. And while some people like myself may like a lot of coloration with tube amplifiers, this is actually a nice touch. It's like it sounds correct. And honestly, I can see people that like Class D amplifiers or well-measuring amplifiers that like the technicality aspect, liking this amplifier, and usually they will hate tube amplifiers. So this is one of the tube amplifiers that I think that some people that like technicalities will appreciate even if they don't like tube amplifiers. So it's really nice. It's a really nice touch. It's a really good entry level into what tube amplifiers can do, but at the same time, it does really well on certain things to where the $1,300 price tag is like, wow, that kind of performance for that. And so we'll talk about that, but let's again start with the bass. For bass, in ultra linear mode, it is dynamic, it's punchy, it's a KT88 design. So out of all the EL34 300B designs out there, KT88 designs I found to be quite the most punchy and dynamic sounding tube designs out there. And this is true for this amplifier as well. In ultra linear mode, very punchy, very dynamic. It can surprisingly power a lot of speakers in my room, no problem. And I'm talking about even the Q acoustics back there, although not to ear bleeding, blasting levels. But in triode mode, no way, absolutely no way. 6 watts, it barely drives the speakers, and it seems to be a little bit less dynamic than I would want it. But then when you hear vocals, right, with sensitive speakers like Tectons or horn speakers, it's beautiful. The vocals are just very beautiful, very pure sounding, very clean sounding, but it's nice because it's clean sounding without being bright or fatiguing sounding. So that's what I like about this unit, is that it's done well. And from my understanding, Mr. Young relies on measurements and his tools to properly design his tube amplifiers, within margin, so that the noise floor is low and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, very clean sound. And that's what you get. You get a very clean sound, but in a much different way than you would get from a very clean sounding solid state amplifier. So people that say, well, tube amplifiers, they suck, maybe they should try this one out because it's neutral. It really is neutral, but it's quite clean sounding, but it does still have that tube magic. And that's pretty rare. That's from, carefully designed choices made with the transformers, as well as, because Mr. Young knows what he's doing, I'm assuming. So quite nice to see, designs that translate to real life experiences that sound really nice. Now, when it comes to the mid-range, like I said, very clean, very neutral, very nice, but it still has a little bit of that tube flavor where the vocals become holographic and the soundstage opens up and it's a little bit more vivid sounding. There's tube amplifiers out there that is like vintage sounding, where I talk about like, wow, this is so tubey, it's so colored, it's so wrong, but it's so nice. It's nice because it's so wrong. But then there's other ones that doesn't sound tubey at all. There's amplifiers out there that's tube amplifiers that I might as well just go and get solid state amplifiers because they don't sound like tube amplifiers. They're just super clean, it's really dynamic, and they're trying to bring the noise floor down as low as possible. And there's nothing about the tube amplifier that I like because it's a tube amplifier that doesn't sound like a tube amplifier. Anyways, this one kind of falls in the middle. It's a nice balance between neutrality and technicality, but at the same time, it does have that tubey characteristic to some degree, just a touch of tube magic right there, just sprinkled on for that soundstage to open up and kind of bloom. And so for people that like technicality, but they're like, I don't like that overly warm, overly exaggerated tube sound, like Jay does, then this might be it for you. And when it comes to high frequency, it's the same deal. Again, very clean, very neutral. The highs don't seem to be over exaggerated or under exaggerated, just about right. And it's sweet. You can sense the sweetness, and that's what you get with good tube amplifiers. And this is kind of the sweetness that you get with like a lot of EL34 or 300B designs, but it's kind of rare to have this kind of sweetness with KT88 designs. So this is kind of like maybe one of the few instances where I can say the KT88 in this design is a really nice sweet sounding sound. And for those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about, what the hell is sweet sound? Is it chocolate? Well, it kind of tingles your ears. It kind of makes you feel like a little bit, and it's not bright. It's not like shouting kind of unpleasant kind of sound. It's a very pleasant kind of sound. And honestly, if you told me like there's really expensive components like copper foil caps and stuff like that in this amplifier, I would believe it because of that sweet, refined sound that you get on the top end. It's super refined, super nice, smooth, but at the same time, not smooth as like butter like you get with some tube amplifiers that's overly tubey. It's not over exaggerated or rolled off to make the sound overly more warm like some really tubey sounding tube amplifiers do, like vintage ones like the Dynaco, for example, that I reviewed, that I really like. I like that tube coloration. But maybe you don't, and maybe you want something neutral that has a nice balance, that's good with technicalities, super clean, but at the same time have a little bit of that, wetness, that a little bit of that tube magic that people are talking about, but not too much. And that's what this tube amplifier is. And I think it's a really nice balance. It walks a really nice balance to where I think a lot of people will appreciate this, both the technicality side and both the tube world side. Lastly, when it comes to sound staging and imaging, again, because the amplifier is pretty neutral and is good at those technicalities as well, it is pretty darn good with imaging. Like you can spot things really easily. And like if you take this and compare it to some Class D amplifiers, you'll be surprised which one you prefer. I've had people in here that was Class D fans. So I had the NAD C298 that I had for a long time right beside this amplifier, and I said, we're playing the Class D amplifier right now. Instead, I had the Fluxion audio playing. And they were like, this is nice. Yes, what I expect of NAD. And then I said, well, we're actually playing the Fluxion audio. And then they were like, what? no way that's a tube amplifier. Absolutely not. And then I switched it over and they were like, wow, the Fluxion audio sounds more lively, more real, more holographic. And now they're tube fans. So, I mean, it's what I do, guys. I convert people to the tube side. So jokes aside, like the point I'm trying to make here is that this is a nice balance between the overly tubey and the not so tubey, very clean, very neutral, and very not even neutral, because there's bright ones out there that's like, I have more detail than solid state amplifiers and I have more bass than solid state amplifiers. Look at me. Not one of those. Those are, I don't get the point of those, because why not just get a solid state amplifier at that point? Why would I bother with a tube amplifier? If I'm buying a tube amplifier, I want a tube amplifier. This is good because it's still a tube amplifier, but it sounds neutral, good at technicalities as well. So it's kind of like a marriage between best of both worlds in a way, and it's done right. It's not too swayed to one end or too swayed to the other side. It is just right in the middle, in my opinion, and it's a really nice balance, and it's a good balance to get, and it's a hard balance to get right, but Mr. Young did it on this one, and I look forward to looking at more of his designs in the future because I was definitely impressed with this one. And sometimes when you're hearing this amplifier, you get goosebumps, and that's kind of what tube amplifier experience is. It's like you don't get goosebumps because of technicality, like, oh, look at that bass, or look at that detail, like some technicalities guys do. They get goosebumps when they hear the technicality things. But you know what? You hear goosebumps because of like the holographicness, the tube magic within that neutrality. And it's a really, again, it's a really interesting balance and hard to explain because it is neutral and it is pretty darn nicely balanced from top to bottom, from bass to treble, but it still has that tube mid-rangeness to it that you can expect from tube valve units. So that's quite nice. Now lastly, if you're talking about value, I know a lot of people are gonna be asking me, how does it compare to the Willsenton? How does it compare to other tube integrated budget amplifiers that you have reviewed? And I would say the sound quality is quite uneven grounds. Those have their strength, this has its strength. I wouldn't say one is clearly blowing one out the other, but I would say if you like what I described about the Fluxion audio, and if you like the idea that where your money is going is towards an engineer directly in the pockets of the engineer that designed it, that's working on these things, and you're supporting his work and supporting his livelihood of doing this as a passion, then I think I like that idea. I don't know about you, but I think in terms of performance, they're about the same. It's really dependent on what you want. Some of the Willsenton units are more towards the a little bit more technicality side, and some of the reviews that I've done of Willsenton units or other Chinese amplifiers, or more budget amplifiers I should say, have been more on the more tubey side. So go check those reviews out, see what you think, and then come back to this one and then see what you think about this and see which one you want as your first tube amplifier, or your second, or your third, or what have you. Just keep it going because that's what makes this fun. I love trying out different tube amplifiers, and I have a few in here and some other non-tube amplifiers. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Hope this video was helpful. And if it was, you know what to do. Click that like button because it helps me out and it doesn't cost you anything. And also subscribe for more audio videos just like this. And of course, more tube amplifiers, but not just that. More coming very soon on speakers and other greatness. Anyways, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next one.